Octopus.
Cool, we're back. Thank you so much for that presentation, Nestor and Steffen. Thank you, Cynthia, also for yours too. What we're going to do now is have a bit of a free-roaming discussion on the topic of like offline media exchange, because it feels like there are two similar but quite different ecosystems, in the sense that one feels, certainly from the way you presented it, to have much deeper roots, and that's what I kind of really took away from your presentation, the way that El Paquete Semanal is building on a kind of a pre-existing practice of sharing media in the form of books. I'm not sure how much you know about the Kenyan kind of tech ecosystem, but one service which is always referred to as M-Pesa, which is the mobile money platform. I'm not sure what happened last year, but I think in 2019, 50% of the gross national product was transacted on the M-Pesa platforms. It's absolutely huge. And what's really interesting about M-Pesa, this is a slight repetition for people, no, maybe I didn't mention it yesterday, is that it builds on an existing system of remittances, which was pre-digital. So there was always a system of sending money to relatives or sending money around the country, but that was typically done via the bus network or via relatives or via people. And then M-Pesa enabled a way to send money digitally. So that would be a little bit like the direction where I would first go. In the presentation, Nestor, you mentioned that your grandfather couldn't make that transition because there was a kind of a financial obstacle in place. How did other families or agents or systems, like how do these two systems relate to one another? Is the book sharing system a kind of existing cultural practice, or is it also can you also extend the particular paqueteros to families that were always somehow sharing media? That question is to Nestor. Yeah.
For one hand, one of the problem was economically, because in the beginning, for the beginning of this new evolution of the system that used computers and hard drive, all this device was incredibly expensive in Cuba. Like, if you have a computer, it will be very, very weird. Even when the government starting to selling computers in the official, shoppings or in official store, was very expensive. And this is one of the big challenge for my grandfather, but also, and the older situation was knowledge. Like, do you need to know, having a basic, knowledge about computer, or how to, I don't know, copy, or how this work, and this situation was too big for him, and at some point this was not a big problem for another people that was in the business, and in general, I think the transition was very like the same transition in relation with years before. Like, for example, when we're thinking about all the steps, the first step was book, and after we'll have a transition to videotapes, like a VHS videotapes, and after we'll have a transition to this, like DVDs or VCDs, and all these transitions was very like like a normal process. The only big transition, I think, was like the weekly packet, because all the high tech needs in relation with like do you need like a big computer with very fast, because everything is in relation with how fast you can create copies of 1 terabyte, and also do you need buy a not a big number, but you need buy more than one hard drive, and all this new technology was very expensive in the beginning. in relation with our research, we'll find actually brands coming from the times of BH and CDs that continue in the weekly packets business. It's like the same brand and the same name and the same people, just changing in the time, like changing technology for continue copy things and continue in the business of distribution of entertainment materials. But in relation with all this phenomenon, I think the most interesting thing is actually how the people, like all the people in Cuba learn about share materials offline, or how all this human connection net is working between cities, and all this net, and all this practice it's a kind of impossible to create something like right now. Me, like an artist, I will love to create a project when I can just in working with the way that the people consume something, or the way that the people do it things in relation with digital and distribution. But this is a kind of very, very, very difficult situation, and the weekly packet exists right now because of that, because this big history. Steffen.
And what I wanted to add, what I'm like really fascinated about also in anthropological terms is, as Nestor says, that it's this like human-made infrastructure, this vernacular infrastructure, this human infrastructure, but that this infrastructure also always draws on like kind of the state infrastructures, like kind of, and redistributes them, like how Nestor described like kind of in the 1990s that when his uncle had somebody who worked in a youth computer club and who could use kind of the technology there in the night to copy like kind of DVDs like that went on then on the private market. And that is something that also still continues up until today, because there's a lot of people who have made a business out of sharing, for example, the paid public Wi-Fi in the Wi-Fi parks with like an application that is called Connectify. So they have their own Cuenta, their own account, but then share it to other people and charge money for it. Or also like the whole Paquete is downloaded here in Cuba also from people who have some privileged access to the state internet infrastructure, because it's still kind of technicians in like tourist hotels who download all that stuff, or people who have good internet connection at government workplaces. So how this human infrastructure always, or this informal infrastructure always feeds from the state infrastructure, I think is also something very fascinating. It exists since 30 years already.
The distribution is using like sometimes official transportation, like cars that move between cities, and the taxi driver or the guy is taking the bus or whatever is taking a bag full of hard drive from Havana to Santiago. It's always getting inside and outside the government institution. But the reason is because it's just people. It's not like a big business or a corporation. It's like random people working inside this phenomenon and coming inside and coming outside all the time.
And I think what's also important to know in that context, and that's if you don't know the Cuban context, that's actually a bit weird. I think it's still like 80% of the Cubans still have like kind of a state employment, so they're somehow employed with the job. But very often it's super, super bad paid. Like very often it's just like, I know, okay, now we had like a change in the monetary system, but before it was like $30 a month or something, like up until a year ago. So people actually had to find ways of earning extra income because there was just no way around it. And that's also, I think, one of the reasons why people started to redistribute state infrastructures. The person at the bodega that hands out like kind of the food that you get with your libreta, with your ration card, would always keep something on the side to sell it on the black market. The minibus driver who's supposed to like bring hospital patients to hospital has this little side gig of transporting a paquete semanal. So actually that's something a lot of Cubans actually live off, redistributing the state infrastructure to make some money on the private, on the informal market.
I would like to then quickly pass on to Cynthia, because a key word there is like side hustle. I think in Nairobi, my experience, and this is what I wanted to ask you, Cynthia, is a lot of people, okay, Nairobi, Kenyans aren't typically poorly employed by the state, but many people have side hustles because it's just kind of necessary. So I wanted to ask you if you saw any kind of similarities with the sort of world which Nestor and Steffen were describing in terms of how in the former times books and VHS and then DVDs are being shared. If there was anything similar in Nairobi if you remember, like a way of sharing media before people sharing flash disks, and also just in general, if you had, I'm not sure if you had a chance if you managed to watch the stream, but if you had any kind of feelings about how like that system of exchange connects with what you were observing in your research.
In my field of research in informal settlements in Kibera, I think that when it comes to sharing content, I think with videos and the flash disk, it's not something that people use more often as it would be compared to the phones. And I think people are more comfortable with, something that you can, it's portable, you can carry around your phone and use it all the time that you want, compared to maybe the old type of using, it's quite bulky, as one of them mentioned. It's really, right now, it can't be something that many people embrace. But due to the fact that you can carry around your phone and you can always get the information that you're inquiring to find out in the internet, I think much more comparison to what used to happen is that many people have moved from using the flash disk to the phone, but it's still applicable. It's still used for videos and music, as Aaron stated. So I don't know if that is answers the question that you wanted, or could you maybe still?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good start. Definitely. I mean, what did I want to say? I haven't. I think an interesting parallel is in terms of what you're talking about, Steffen, like how infrastructures kind of sort of leak into one another or leech off one another. So what's quite common in Kenya is to have a shop where you buy VCDs with like I don't know how many MP3s fit on a VCD, but like a super compressed songs being like distributed like at a small kiosk. And now I think they've also kind of segued into the sort of offline media distribution systems. And now rather than buying a super compressed VCD or CD with loads and loads of songs on, you'll just go in with your phone, and then they'll kind of put all the music on your phone. And I think that's one of them, a really common way also in which people are kind of experience offline media exchange. And also, like as Cynthia said, I mean, I've got a huge kind of group of friends that don't have laptops. And I remember being with one of the guys, I think Steffen, I told you about, I was doing this research about cyclists, bicycle subculture in Nairobi, and how they share footage of like them doing kind of bicycle performances via phone to phone. And he was there with his phone, and he had like a bunch of micro SD cards, and he's like, "Oh, this is my archive. Like it's like 3 micro SD cards, right?" And my archive is like a kind of a big box with maybe 30 like little like 1 terabyte hard drives in from different film projects in, right? And it was just kind of, it's the same thing, but one hard drive is actually a little bit easier to lose than the other one. But that was, sorry, one archive. Yeah. Anyway. I don't know, maybe I just pass on to you guys if you have any comments.
I have a question, or do you have a comment, Nestor? You wanted to say something?
It's very interesting the way that different all the contexts work. Here, I think in Cuba, I feel, this is not exactly part of my research, but I am talking about experience here in relation with what you say about how the people consume, materials. Here in Cuba, I think everybody have a TV. Like, it's a huge percent of the people that have a TV, and the Cubans in general are very focused in, we'll have just one, like, media governmental channel, like at the national TV. We have like a 4 channels, but everything is national TV. We don't have any international channels here in, official way. And I think maybe because many things, like, because of the system and everything, this channel was a directly line to, when the government can communicate news and communicate with the people. And sometimes it's very heavy. Like, for example, because we are a Caribbean country, can come in a hurricane or something like that, and the people are watching news like normally. Like, it's something that most of the Cubans do it. And this is why I feel that it's part of the culture right now. Like, if you have a new home, you must to have a TV. Like, it's something that is part of the day by day to the Cubans. And this is why, do you have like this, device in your home? Normally, this device have like a USB port. And I think one of the development of the distribution of entertainment material is coming because of that, because the Cuban have TV and USB port, and, using hard drive or USB for, the distribution was the, best way to actually, getting more people, in this distribution phenomenon. And actually, all the Cubans also have phones, but was very weird that an older Cuban shared to you a movie in a phone to see in a phone. Like, normally we'll use a lot of different apps, the same in your context, for shared materials offline. The most famous is Sapia. It's like everybody here have Sapia to share materials using Bluetooth. But normally if you copy a movie, it's because you will download to USB, and you will put it in a TV to see the movie in the TV. It's no more. It's not. We not use so. We don't have the same relation with the phone as you have. And the situation with the internet is also very peculiar too. Like, it's very expensive. It's the same, I feel. But in another hand, like, we don't have any free Wi-Fi access here. It's like all the Wi-Fi that we'll have, we'll need to pay for that. It's different price. The price of the mobile data is a little bit more expensive, and it's in relation with the data, like megas and gigas. And the price of the Wi-Fi is it's in relation with the time that you spend online. And it's a kind of 2 different ways, but mobile data is more fast and Wi-Fi is more slow. And normally the people using Wi-Fi for download things because it's cheaper, and mobile data for WhatsApp or communication, things like that. But I feel very interested in connections between context, and it's amazing, your presentation. Thank you very much, Cynthia.
Do you want to answer, Cynthia, something? Or?
No, not really. It's just quite interesting from the way they do things compared to how Nairobi works in particular. I think the fact that you're saying that more people use a phone in preference to Wi-Fi, I think it's the other way around here. Wi-Fi is what people prefer using more than their phone, because you've talked about it. It's expensive to deal with data bundle. But I don't know, you're talking about something to do with Sabia?
An app.
It's like an application.
For sure, yeah, for sure. Like a completely using just Bluetooth. It's an app that you can connect a phone with another phone, even if it's an Android system and an iOS system. You can use Instapia for communicate between phones. Yeah.
It's great to know.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat. Zapier, huh? Yeah. I have a question. There's a couple of questions from the audience I would like to ask you. There is a question from the co-organizer, or the initiator of this whole series of symposia, Time of Hands, from the Academy of Media of the Arts of the World in Cologne. They would like to know a specific thing, because I think you mentioned that the law of legalizing copying and distribution. And the person writes, yeah, I cannot fathom that. And she would like to, or he would like to know more. It's about the 1959 law. Is someone, can you expand a little bit on that?
And is it about piracy, or is it about like the labor laws that people can work independently from the state? It's about media piracy, no?
I'm not sure. I just took the question out of context, but I can ask. The person can reformulate, and then I can ask.
I can quickly sum it up. What we mentioned in the video with the change in 1959 was basically that everything was nationalized. No, all the industries, all the private sector was nationalized. So basically, from then on, everybody was working for the state, and only Raúl Castro from like 2010 on like liberalized like kind of private initiatives, the private economy a bit. And that's actually also related to the piracy question, because the state not only nationalized all businesses and industry, it also nationalized the media sector. So in the Cuban institution, it still said like there's no independent media. Independent media is something that doesn't exist here. So El Paquete is also a bit in this like illegal gray zone in that sense. And in terms of piracy is actually also something that the state itself does. Because of the US embargo, there's no legal way to actually license, for example, Hollywood films here in Cuba, no? So even the Cuban television shows pirated Hollywood films, no? Because what's actually quite interesting with the state media, with this huge success of El Paquete, the state kind of had to follow up, because it was quite obvious that like people are a bit tired of like kind of the state propaganda in the official media. So from the 90s on, the Cuban television also started to show more entertainment stuff, a Hollywood film on Saturday night. Very often you would still, like in recent years, you would still see like kind of the shown title that it's actually like a preview copy for the Oscars or something. You would really see its pirated material on the television. And the state actually also releases its own Paquete Semanal that is distributed through these youth computer clubs, which is called Mi Mochila, which is a bit more educational, a bit more informative, but actually also has a big selection of like telenovelas and pirated Hollywood films. So the state actually really also engages in piracy.
But on the other hand, is the state in any form? Did you learn about any kind of I wouldn't say censorship, but kind of manipulating in this, so that, or kind of giving guidelines. Okay, you're allowed to distribute this, but this, like pornography.
So maybe you can explain how auto censorship works in El Paquete.
Like, you know, and in Cuba, all the problems beginning on the ideologic and ending on the ideologic. You know, it's the only problem here. And all the private sectors know that, and you know, we'll love to see the weekly packet like a net of distribution. And it's very interesting how decentralized, you know, are all the net in relation with economy, in relation with materials. We need to think in that, you know, a group of people create, you know, make a selection of the content here in Havana, and after this group of people start to sharing, you know, the information to all the Cuba, and in this like structure, we'll have like so many people that can have access to this data and change it or put in a new information. But in general, the weekly packet have like two rules, and one is nothing in relation with pornography materials. But also, for example, I remember to see in the weekly packet Gaspar Noé movie, for example. It's very, you know, like a sexual and implicit content, but it's not pornography. And on the other hand, nothing in relation with political materials, but this is also, with very, I don't know, like weird borders, because I remember to see in the weekly packets the one, like a meeting of Trump in Miami, very, very radical in relation with Cuba, but at some point, it's something that maybe the government in Cuba is not so, feel not so bad, because it's a way to share this kind of information in an informal way. I completely, I think I am almost completely sure, because of the time I work in relation with this phenomenon, that the phenomenon itself not have a kind of a structure of control with one people working from the government to his job is checking all the information, because this is so big. We are thinking that right now it's almost like a 1 tera per day. It would be like a huge work to check all this information, but also all the people are working inside the phenomenon of the weekly packet, like independently have a kind of auto censorship system, because it's a business finally, and if he have a mistake and he put some material, it's like a political or something, he can lose his business, because it would be a big deal. Yeah,
I understand. There is actually thank you. There is actually a comment from Madhu. She says it, and it's also her question. It was her question before. It reminds her of the folk film industry in India, which is fully operated through shared CDs. So that's even today. That might be interesting for all of you who are researching in that kind of offline media distribution. I have a comment. It reminds me of drug dealing. It's like, I mean, come on, read. Like I was raised with cyberspace, Neuromancer, and Gibson stuff. It's like it's basically about these guys, data dealers. Yeah, they're running around. They have like chips in their heads. They deal data. And what you said before, I mean, I had to laugh during the video, because it was like, okay, so they have decentralized but top down somehow. It's not a monopoly, but the goods are super addictive. They're sub-dealers. They remix the contents. They put their own brands on top of it. Exactly. The government is doing. It's like a self-censorship. You don't want to put too much rat poison, because it kills people, but enough to stretch it and make a profit, etc., etc. It all looks like very professional. So in Cuba, as it looked super professional. And then, as you said, Cynthia, in Kenya, it looks in a way super anarchistic, like truly decentralized. Like in weird places, people are doing weird things. And maybe one thing I thought about was like Matatus could be the perfect platform actually for media distribution, because people have time. Matatus are the buses in Kenya it's like the unofficial official public transport. It's privately held and owned and run. It's for an outsider, it's super chaotic. You don't know. It's like with hand signs, you have the routes and stuff like that. But people have a lot of time in there. They have time at their hands because they don't have that much to do, in the sense of, they can switch anything, hardware, software, Bluetooth, and stuff like that. I guess it's happening, but not in an organized way.
Yeah, that cyberpunk relation, or that it reminded, is actually an idea we had as well, Nestor and I. This February we shot like kind of a video installation that is like kind of a remake of William Gibson's short story Johnny Mnemonic, about this guy who has a hard drive in his head and like physically transports data that are too kind of sensitive to put on the internet. We basically made a Cuban remake of that. Some of our actors were also like real paqueteros. And we're editing it now, so hopefully we get it done sometime end of the summer or so. But yeah, it's definitely something. And we worked with a Cuban cyberpunk science fiction author who since the early 2000s has taken on this idea of translating cyberpunk to the Cuban context, because he also feels he lives in kind of a cyberpunk reality here in Cuba. So that's definitely something. We also had.
We'll use actually the real place, like with all the hard drive and everything, and was It's like it's very cyberpunk. Like the reality here in Cuba is actually very cyberpunk. And also, like, for a second, like the relation do you have with this idea of drug dealers? It's something that we think too. Like, the only thing is that the way we'll see pirates is not good or bad. It's the only way. When you don't have a good way to receive materials, it's not a wrong way. Is any feeling in the context about, oh, the person that create this product is not receiving money because I am buying in the black market? It's not. Is any thinking in relation with the social people in Cuba in relation with this kind of idea? And definitely is fighting between group of people that create content for the paquete. It's the same of at some point have many connection with this idea of drug dealers, but it's like a cool drug dealers structure, because it's not like killing people or something like that. It's more like fighting for areas in relation with entertainment materials.
I mean, there's two things. I think that's a nice way, actually, Nestor, to kind of go back to the topic of the symposium, which is actually on games and gamification. And one thing which I sort of was trying to a theory which I was trying to push to Steffen, which he wasn't really buying, and was that the kind of the way in which materials are shaped are shared and travel around. It's kind of a game. It has this kind of game-like element, and Steffen was like, nah, actually, maybe it's more a right. People have a right to the internet. It's increasingly being discussed in these terms as actually like a human right, right? Access to information, etc. And so I guess this is just a sort of an open question to all of you here. How do you respond to this premise that we've got, like a little bit trying to frame and understand the exchange of offline media as not something that's gamified, but something that's maybe a kind of a game? And that would be the first question. I would ask first Nestor, and then maybe after that, then Cynthia, you could also respond to that.
I have the same feeling that the Steffen have, maybe, like, definitely the access of some information was of one of the, the hard, the
necessities.
Of the phenomenon. But I am a kind of gamer too, and definitely I love the metaphor in relation with all this play going back, because at some point, for sure, this kind of interaction between people and the way all these systems work have some kind of connection with play. Like, actually, the price of the weekly packet is no expensive, and all this system is working because one of the things that you are telling about, this kind of context, that the people have a lot of time. The time is utopical here. It's not, the time don't have a directly relation with money. And this is why a group of people can spend a lot of time just putting information inside folders and copy information. And the price of that is not so high, And in this way, I think, this is why me and Steffen developing our project that is a game about the weekly packet. The connection is there. We love this idea of how the weekly packet working, and also the weekly packet history, because when we're thinking right now, the weekly packet just about a group of information, it's not so, for me, it's not so interesting. It's like it's the same to Netflix or Hulu. I think one of the most interesting things about the weekly packet is actually the distribution and all the human system, or the offline system of distribution. And at some point, this is something that me and Steffen, this is our focus in relation with developing project inside the weekly packet.
So on my part, I think when we talk about gamification, I think things that people would be excited in informal settlements. They don't want things that, it's going to just, they are fighting with it to just try and understand. They want things that they can have a one-on-one connection. Like when I get into a game, can I understand it? I don't want something that is just going to take me around, because already throughout the day you have so much in your head, you have a lot of things in your hand, and you just want something to take you away for a moment. That is, like it's been mentioned in our matatus, we have a lot of time. But that time you cannot spend it while you're just trying to figure out how does this work out, and like what is its objective. I think people here in informal settlements, what they want is pure entertainment, more maybe on preference to education. I think by the time they get the objective of what you're trying to research on, it is just for them to just have fun and just pass it over. It's a game. I want, it reaches a lot of people, whether in rural or in urban. A video has taken its circle, and it's just making people entertained, and people giving you their feedback on what they feel about the entire thing. So I think on offline sharing, purposefully, I'd say in informal settlements, it's just entertainment. I don't think if they understand from the perspective of education or being informed about it.
I wanted to add, actually what I find also, where I also see a relation between what you described in Nairobi and with the El Paquete seminar, is like, the strong focus on entertainment. And actually, that El Paquete is really like, things can go viral on El Paquete. There's a very important folder on humor, one on interesantes, where people like share funny YouTube videos, and video games are shared. Nestor, which is actually also a very interesting art project. Nestor has its own art section once a month, like a folder that acts like kind of a digital exhibition space for like Cuban or international artists, and where Nestor also distributes like documentaries or video art about art, video artworks, calls for like in the artist community for like scholarships or like residencies. And this is also something that happens more and more, that people also really distribute content on a very local basis. There's an LGBT section that sometimes appears in some paquetes. So people like Nestor or like kind of local artist activists also use this material like for distribution and for communication, also in a very playful way, I would say.
Yeah, because it's like from a gamification aspect, it's kind of, but it's for me is this question that we also in the seminar that was where you also joined, Steffen, and showed your fantastic video that you did about the gig economy. It's very difficult to kind of frame it if you don't want to stick too much to the definitions, because basically you could say, okay, if something features something like rules and entertainment and thrill and challenges, you can start to talk about gamification. And on the other level, I think our brain is basically the ultimate game engine. It's the ultimate PlayStation or whatever you want to call it. So in the end, you can go, it's more like a question of how much, but Steffen, for example, you as a scientist, or also Sam as a researcher, or Cynthia as researchers, you need to kind of fix on some rules. But me, I don't know how Nestor sees this, but me as an artist, I don't care. I can swap and switch and reframe like anything all the time. I don't have to obey any rules. So for me, life is a game, but then something can be gamified, etc. But that's just as a comment. I want to ask a question because I would say we could discuss for another 5, maximum 10 minutes. And maybe you want to also ask some questions or bring some topics that are important to you. I would like to just ask one question to Cynthia and also a comment from Alonso Cedillo from Meco. He just says to your work, Steffen and Nestor, he said, "Oh man, Steffen and Nestor's work is out of this world." So he was blown away by the video and the research you did, and also I think the way you presented it in a kind of artistic research form. And then the question, Cynthia, to you, and I am just reading it because I don't understand the question. He says, well, I'm just thrilled of the way that things are being used in Kenya. It's super inspiring. And like all this community inclusion, he calls it, it reminded me a bit of technovation. I don't know this term. Maybe someone can explain it to me. But I think her vision is more genuine. I joined when it had already started, like your lecture. But maybe if could you ask her if she's familiar with grassroots economics in Kenya and the community inclusion currencies, and what does she think of them? Can you answer that?
No, I think that I'm not familiar with that. And actually, there's a word you've mentioned. What was that again?
Sorry?
Techno what?
Yeah, technovation.
Technovation.
Yeah, I mean, it's technology and innovation, I guess.
I'll need to understand it, that sentence in a bit to make it easier so that I can be able to answer it. But it has me all confused. Perhaps Sam would come to my rescue then.
Oh no, sorry. Okay, I googled it quickly. No, sorry. I think it's also a bit lost in translation. Technovation is a global technology education nonprofit that applies a grassroots approach to empowering underserved community, especially girls and women, to address local problems through cutting-edge technologies like mobile and AI. That's what I just researched.
I mean, actually, well, I think one thing maybe Cynthia's could be interesting to talk about is the chama. Maybe you could just quickly explain, because I think that's kind of, we were talking about that just before, coincidentally. So maybe you could quickly explain how a chama works as a kind of community grassroots support system.
Okay. The chama works in this way because, life here in Nairobi and particularly Africa is not easy compared to your countries. So it is a way of like a side hustle, or maybe it's a discipline for you to maybe be able to put some money somewhere so that it can be able to help you on some rainy days, as I'd put it. But then in more advanced chamas would, it depends with like the group of people that you are together. How much can you like say afford? It can be weekly, it can be daily.
Okay, that was going to be my question. So I know it was maybe a personal question, but how many people in your chama, and roughly how much do you guys, if you don't have to answer that if it's too personal?
No, we are 8 people and we do 5,000 a month.
Okay. And then how is that money then redistributed? Do you put it in a bank together, or does one person get the money every month, or how does that work?
Yeah, we started by each person getting that money every end of the month, but then we presumed that it does not help much. So we decided that this money goes to the end of the year, where you're able to do something that is concrete, other than you just getting that money end of the month and it goes to the basic needs that you'd require. So what happens is that we take it to the end of the year, which is, I'd say from my part, it's a big discipline, because you have to just see your money go throughout the year. And then when you get it, it's all worth it. It's able to sort a lot of things, or even you're able to invest in something you can buy. People are going towards buying of plots and great things, or even start a business.
And then another thing occurred to me actually is that maybe apart from the Matatus as a space of sharing data, I think it could be interesting for Steffen and Nestor to know, like in more detail, like what a base is. So maybe you could just describe a base and how it works and who meets there.
Okay, so a base is it's just basically a place that people have taken to be like a center for meeting, like on it can be daily basis or even only the weekend, and you're brought together by things that you love. It can be chewing miraa, which is cat. It can be sharing those videos and even talking about football games that are coming up. or even discussing on maybe betting games, like which teams should you people think that we should bet on. So the kind of things, a base is just a place. It doesn't have to be like even a building. It can be just some stones somewhere. It can be some abandoned building somewhere. That is where people make it because somehow the police officers are allergic to such kind of people coming together like that. So sometimes they try and find a secure place because you will be like vulnerable to police, arresting you for maybe smoking publicly, or maybe you just a rowdy youth that want to do something. You're planning robbery or something. So basically, it's just a base. It's a place that people who have something in common come to do and have fun.
Thanks, Cynthia. Because I thought that was also important to mention because of what you were saying, Nestor, about time. From what I understood, you said for many people, Cuba is a place where people do have time to kind of sort out, the folders in the paquete. And I think for certain demographics in Nairobi, time is also something which is there. And it's if you walk like in like the slums or informal settlements or the poorer areas at around 4 o'clock, you'll see like kind of whole groups of young men going to their different bases. Like it's a kind of daily migration, and you go to like football base or Mirror base or Scrabble base, and then that's also like a real site where data is exchanged, and the data then that is exchanged is often then connected thematically to what that base is about. So of course, at a football base, there'll be football, like the best goal, like clip or whatever. So that's also super interesting. Like you talk about what interests you about El Paquete is actually the network. It's not so much, the way the kind of people as infrastructure, almost like this kind of emergent, extremely complex network that can't have just one architect. It's a sort of an emergent system, and this sort of I think that is definitely shared in many ways by Nairobi. There are many distributed networks that you can observe there, not just bases and data, but also like Hans was talking about the matatus. It's like extremely complicated network which has just emerged through lots of different individuals making lots of different decisions. So that was just I just wanted to kind of articulate a couple of those connections briefly.
There's actually, sorry to interfere, there's actually one more user question from the audience. Should I quickly pose it and then you just
please,
continue?
Yeah.
Whoever wants to answer, it's the question. I'll just read it. Thanks for the wonderful presentations on the offline systems. Latest software developments totally contradict offline systems. So cheap phones or computers like Pi are available for under $50 to act as a front end. I would see the future in a spreading online community and have the computational power in server farms. Would you not see systems like Starlink as the key to connect rural communities? It's a question by the Boltzmann user. Anybody want to take this? It's kind of a techno-pragmatic question, I think.
I think what okay.
After you, Steffen.
No, I think maybe I didn't get it right, but the question kind of presupposes cheap and free internet access, no?
Yeah, I mean in Kenya, I know in Kenya everybody has a phone, so and as you mentioned in Cuba, everybody's using phones to Bluetooth exchange, but he's bringing in the Starlink thing, which is now way too expensive. But the idea, I think, is to have basically this Silicon Valley maniac white supremacy idea is to bring, it's like this godlike vision of me as Elon Musk bringing the poor people the internet, and that's a story that we have since 30 years. Since the internet
Facebook have something in India, and then they were
exactly
kicked out.
Exactly. But I think Boltzmann's question more goes into whether this is going to challenge the offline systems, because it's going to make super cheap internet available. That's the vision, right? It's not the reality; it's the vision to make super cheap internet available to.
I think in Cuba, the U.S. embargo would probably be in the way first, and then kind of the Cuban government would also have to accept that kind of technology import. No, I mean they have a lot of, like, China plays a big role here. You know, all these like public Wi-Fi parks run on Huawei technology. Yeah, all the technological infrastructure is basically run by the state, and there's no private players. So it would all come down to what the state allows to enter and what it doesn't.
Even like this is a normal question that we normally receive about all this idea of the weekly packet will disappear because of, you know, internet connection and things like that. But, you know, it's very epidermical just thinking about the weekly packet as a version of internet, or, you know, directly in relation with internet connection, because it's more like we'll have a society that actually is learning right now to navigate online. Like it's a small process. All this practice, like coming from an analogical experience and analogical time in Cuba, that it's not so like far away. It's just like 10 years, 7 years ago, and this is why two different things. Definitely, we're starting to consuming the weekly packet before the public internet access in Cuba, and definitely the weekly packet before this Wi-Fi park and before the mobile data was different because it's more content. Right now we'll not receive so many websites in the weekly packet or things like that, or news in this form of media, because you can just navigate online. But definitely, like, the process, even when the embargo stopped and the Cubans have access to pay for online service, this means that we'll need to have like a credit bank accounts working in the international world. That's something that exists right now for Cubans. But even with all these changes, my mom will have a lot of problem to navigate, to find his soap operas. And this is why I think, the system of offline distribution will continue until we'll just not make a solution for very cheaper and fast and access to pay for service online. Is also about learning how to use and actually having time online to navigate and download things. It's more heavy here.
It's also programming, right? I mean, the Paquete is also a programming. So it could be that if the infrastructure comes to Cuba in the sense that it is here in other countries, broadband, streaming possibilities, etc., that Paquete will transform into a programming channel, like into a kind of a hybrid television streaming content distribution channel or something.
Basically, it's a very personalized thing of distributing data. Now, a lot of paqueteros we interviewed, a lot of them, for example, serve older people and really sit down with them and go through the content. Others curate USB sticks for restaurants just with music videos, so the restaurants can plug in the USB and have music videos running on their TVs all the time. So yeah, there's definitely also this human component of being a living algorithm, so to say, that recommends stuff, helps. Actually, what I also find very interesting, a lot of these people who resell or redistribute the state internet infrastructure, for example, the paqueteros, all these people who sit in the parks and resell their internet connection via this Connectify app, very often they're kind of the human interface of the state infrastructure. Because if at the beginning in the Wi-Fi parks, I remember when people didn't really know how to connect, then these are actually the people you go to who explain you, who help you download the important apps you have. So it's actually people making a business out of being the human interface or kind of human agent that kind of translates these networks, or that makes these government infrastructures wider available.
One thing about what you said before, it's something that is happening right now, like the transition to some, development in relation with, for example, before the before the Wi-Fi connections and the mobile data, the only access to create like advertising for independent business, was the weekly packet, and was one of the big folders, like right now, system continue, like a lot of restaurant or different business using the weekly packet for advertising, but also it's a lot of companies like studios that before are, in few years ago are just focused on create advertising for distribution, for the packet distribution, but right now are online because the internet is a reality in Cuba, and you can use Facebook or different social network for, create advertising. I think, at some point, all this transition will be like, it's slowly happening in Cuba. The community of YouTubers that Steffen working a lot here in Cuba is also, a group of people that are starting just creating videos for the weekly packet, and right now are on the, YouTube platform. It's a kind of small emigration, as small transitions to the online world, but it's happening like, in Cuba, everything is like offline and online. It's not, you need to select a way. It's more like you can exist in two worlds, and having more access to people.
I'm glad you brought your mum into the conversation, Nestor, because it also reminds me of how my mum gets her like digital video material, which is like through a guy that sells her DVDs at the local shopping center. And it's kind of interesting. Also, I like the way Steffen, you talk about the paqueteros as like human algorithms, because it's certainly the case. Like he's kind of knows a little bit what my mum likes, and kind of will make choices for her. And I was talking to him when I was recently there, and I was like, oh, how's it going? And he's like, man, the DVD business is bad, like, because everyone's now getting Netflix in Nairobi. And he's like, yeah, selling DVDs is like selling pork in Garissa. Garissa is like a Muslim town in the north of Kenya. It's like kind of really perfect sort of description of like how these sort of industries are kind of changing. And I don't know. For me, I love the idea of embodied networks, which are just not just digital, but you have this hybrid, because it's a way, I don't know, it affords another method of navigating all this kind of entertainment, information, this stuff that we're swimming through, right? And I think it's nice to think of it not as an alternative to the internet in the future, but as something which maybe sits alongside it, or who knows. Is there any more questions in the chat? I don't think there are.
No.
Is there any more? Are there any more comments from the discussants? Because then I would probably wrap up. I think we've been talking for a while, and our public is maybe also feeling like the need for a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I would say a very, very warm thank you to all of you. Cynthia, thank you so much for your presentation from the research in Nairobi. Nestor and Steffen from your work in Havana. Hans, thanks for co-hosting. In the background, I'd like to thank Jakob and Luca for doing all the tech stuff. We're very grateful. And of course, to the Academy, I'd like to thank the whole Academy, but in particular Madhu and Clara, who are our contact people and were extremely helpful. Hans, any last words from you?
No, thank you. Enjoy the weekend, and I really enjoyed it, and it was fantastic. And it's all going to be online on the Twitch stream, and in the future in the podcast. we will distribute the links from the different presentations and stuff. So it's all going to be here. But thank you very much for the live event, and it was great. I enjoyed it.
Last thing, thank you to everyone watching on Twitch. That was we really appreciate your comments. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Goodbye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.